or for hell. I'm yelling no more talking, unless it's the truth. You in that bullshit walking when I'm in the...
Yes, welcome back to another edition of E.D.I Mean's Talk My Truth. Where sometimes I take you back and give you the facts. Well, I give you the facts all the time. But sometimes I take you back. Sometimes we're not gonna go back. This particular instance, this particular occasion, we're gonna go back. Because I wanna clarify some things for the audience and for everybody that's paying attention. Clearly, there's a lot of people paying attention because the numbers is going up, videos are spreading, and it's sparking a lot of debate. One thing in particular that has come up recently in response to one of my previous videos, the video I did on Tupac and Quincy Jones linking up. There seems to be a misconception growing, and I'm being misquoted in a lot of different ways. One particular way is that I said that Tupac was leaving death row. I want to be clear, I never said that. You can go back to the video and listen to it. And if you listen to it and listen to it clearly, you will hear, I never said that. You won't hear me say Tupac left death row because I never said that. What I did say, and listen to me clearly, is that Tupac had plans on doing business with Quincy Jones, and those plans did not involve death row. And why would they? His plans were to take Young Noble as a solo artist to QS Records, do a solo deal with Noble. The Outlaws consist of Tupac Shakur and two groups, Dramacidal, Pharoah and Felony, and Young Noble. Pac's plan was to do a Wu-Tang type situation with us, where Young Noble had a solo deal over at QS. The Outlaws would be put out via Machiavelli Records, which was going to be distributed by Death Row Records. So clearly, he would have still been doing business with Death Row Records. As far as Tupac as an artist himself, he said to us he was going to take a break from music for a little while. His plans at the time were to probably put out music every 3 to 5 years at the most. And he was playing with the idea of not really putting any more quote unquote Tupac albums out. And the only time you would hear Tupac was on an Outlaw album. Maybe if he did features or something like that, who knows? But these are some of the ideas he was playing with towards the end of his life. And so I would prefer that if you are, and this goes for anybody, gonna cover the content that I produce, that you make sure you quote me right if you're gonna quote me. Don't put words in my mouth. Quote me. And if you have a question about anything that I put on EDI Mean TV, Talk My Truth, you're more than welcome to hit me up, holler at me, and I will clear it up for you. Again, never said Tupac was leaving death row. As a matter of fact, I believe Tupac felt he was off death row. I believe Tupac felt like he had fulfilled his obligation to Death Row Records and kept his word to Suge Knight when he said, I'll give you 3 albums. That's what the deal was for. It was for 3 albums. All Eyes on Me was a double album, Machiavelli. And just because he appreciated what they did for him, I'm gonna give you the One Nation project as well. That's 4 albums in 1 year. Then my group is gonna stay over there, distributed by Death Row Records, Machiavelli Records. And that brings me to another misconception. I know over the years, a lot of people have quoted Hussein Fatal when he said he didn't sign to Death Row because Tupac didn't want us to sign to Death Row. That's partially true, but partially incorrect. And here's why it's partially incorrect. Because at the time when Tupac said, don't sign to Death Row, it was for a reason. And that reason was because he said, nah, y'all gonna sign to me. Y'all my group. Y'all gonna sign to Machiavelli Records. But he did have plans on allowing Death Row Records to distribute his label, Machiavelli Records, that will put out the Outlaws, that will put out Fatal and Felony possibly, that will put out Storm possibly, and Dramacidal. Remember, the group Dramacidal, which consisted of myself, Napoleon, and Castro, had a full album that was done for Interscope Records. That album could have saw the light of day. That album could have still been put out. It was done, mixed, mastered, ready to go. The only reason it didn't come out is because Tupac was released on bail and went to Death Row Records. So that put that on hold for the time being, okay? So with that being said, yes, Hussein Fatal was right when he said, Pac said, don't sign to Death Row, but there was a reason behind that. We would have been distributed by Death Row. And if you know a little bit about the music business, we was basically gonna still be on Death Row. We'd have been distributed by Machiavelli Records. We'd have been put out by Machiavelli Records, distributed by Death Row Records. And so when we decided to sign with Death Row Records, obviously there is no more Machiavelli Records because the person who started that label, who owned that label, who had the vision for that label was no longer here. So there was no need, there was no possibility for Machiavelli Records. We decided to sign to Death Row Records for a number of reasons. I'll give you a couple of them briefly. We had a lot of music over there. Yeah, that music meant something to us. A lot of that music ended up being the Still I Rise album that we eventually put out. Now, if we leave Death Row and we part ways with Death Row, we part ways with that music in a lot of ways. That music was important to us. It was our last tangible thing that we had to our brothers, Tupac and Yafael. And so, yeah, we went back to Death Row. You know what I mean? And to be honest with you, we had a deal on the table with Interscope Records too. But Interscope Records was taking longer than we wanted them to take. And so we were impatient. We were young. We was ready to get back to it. We were seeing all of these other people steal our shit, to be honest with you, and go out there and do our shit. Bootlegs was all over the place. We was like, nah, we got to get back to it. Interscope taking too long. And so we went to California and we signed with Death Row Records. I want to give a shout out to bombfirst.com, Reggie Wright and John, because they were one of the ones that responded to my video. And I like what they do over there. You know what I mean? I appreciate the love they send my way. I just wanted to clear that up because obviously they weren't privy to some of the conversations that we had personally with Tupac. It's not their fault. They just weren't privy to those conversations. And listen, man, I ain't got no reason to lie to you. Like the great Ice-T said, I ain't got no reason to lie to you. You know what I mean? My content is my content. The numbers it do is gonna do. You know what I mean? The numbers they don't do, it don't do. You know, I'm not here begging for your likes, your comments, or your views. If you appreciate the content, I appreciate that. My goal for starting this channel and doing Talk My Truth was to clear up misconceptions, was to clear up the lies. A lot of lies have been told about the Outlaws and, of course, Tupac Shakur. So my goal my motivation for doing this is just for clarity, man. Just for people to have clarity and understand, getting a sense of understanding of what motivated us, what inspired us, what made us want to do this. So again, never said Tupac was leaving Death Row. I said Tupac was going to do business with Quincy Jones, and that business did not involve Death Row. And again, why would it? As far as Hussein Fatal saying Tupac didn't want us to sign a Death Row, like I said, that's partially true. The only reason it's not the whole truth is because towards the end, Hussein Fatal, quite frankly, wasn't around. And if you've seen some of Young Noble's videos on the Art of Dialogue, you know why he wasn't around. I don't need to get into that. But he wasn't privy to the information that we had. And with that information, it inspired us, it motivated us, it moved us to sign a Death Row Records. Again, I'll send a shout out to Reggie Wright. Hey man, look, Reggie Wright has been solid in his moves. He's clear about who he is and where he stands. And I can respect that. One thing I will always respect about Reggie is that Death Row at one point tried to buy our publishing for a very small price. And when those contracts were drawn up and Reggie Wright brought it to us at the house we were staying at, San Fernando Valley, he was clear. That man looked at us and said, look, I'm just bringing these contracts to y'all. Y'all don't have to sign them. Yeah. He said, y'all don't have to sign them. And guess what? We didn't sign them. And by us not signing them, it allowed us to be in a strategic position between Death Row Records and the estate of Tupac Shakur and his mother, Afeni Shakur, who was running his estate at the time. And so, yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear, because maybe I wasn't clear in my previous video. And if I wasn't, I take full responsibility for that. And I'll be better next time. I'll continue to do this, and I'll continue to be as clear as I can be when I'm giving you this information, so there are no misconceptions and everything is clear. You dig? It's your guy, E.D.I. E.D.I. Mean, talk my truth. I'm gone. Happy holidays, y'all.
Shit walking. When I'm in the booth, I got the roof open, riding and smoking. We on that shit again, like it's 96 again.
What's good? What's good? Welcome back to another edition of EDI Means Talk My Truth. What's good, everybody? Springtime is here. Yeah, man, you only got about 90 days till summer. So I hope you're doing something positive with your life, physically, mentally, spiritually, so you can have a great summer, like I know I am. Man, I want to take y'all back a little bit, man, because I was thinking about a story that I heard about Tupac in the early 90s, and it just spoke to his character and who he was as a young man then and the man he grew to be. And the thought process started because I ran across a video of somebody saying Tupac wasn't a gangster, or he wasn't gangster, or something to that effect. And they were right, actually, because Tupac wasn't a gangster. You know, he never claimed to be a gangster. I never heard Tupac say out his mouth, I am a gangster. Although he did some things in his short life that some may consider very gangster. And this particular story may be considered gangster by some, may be considered heroic, may be considered crazy, stupid, impulsive. I'll let you be the judge. So it's in the early 90s, and one of the most infamous diss songs is all over the place. One of the most infamous diss songs in hip hop history is all over the place. No, No Vaseline. Hit 'Em Up hadn't come out yet. Fuck Compton by a rapper by the name of Tim Dog. Some of y'all old enough to remember this record. Some of y'all are like, who the fuck is Tim Dog? And who would have the balls to say fuck Compton on a record? Well, Tim Dog did. Tim Dog was a rapper from the Bronx. He dropped this record, I believe, in 1991. And it was basically going at NWA. But he called it Fuck Compton because at the time the West Coast was really starting to take off. There were, because of NWA's success, there were a lot of different rappers and rap groups like DJ Quick, Compton Most Wanted, the list goes on, that were coming out, getting deals and being successful. New York hip hop had been dominant for the better part of the creation of hip hop. And up until that point, no other region, even though there were little hits here and there, no other region had started to dominate. And the West Coast definitely was dominating and beginning their run of domination that would last throughout most of the 90s, right? So Tim Dog drops this record, Fuck Compton, infamous, just going at the whole, he even dissed Michelle. I mean, my man was on one. He was wilding, man. I remember being a youngster back then, and me and Castro would listen to the record and just fucking crack up because it was comedy. You know, it was hard to take Tim Dog serious as a rapper because he wasn't the best rapper by any stretch of the imagination. He was it was almost like a novelty act. It was almost like a gimmick to say fuck Compton at that time because there was beginning to be a lot of backlash and a lot of slight and a lot of backhanded disrespect towards the West Coast. And part of the reason was because the West Coast is just so different than the East Coast, from the rap vernacular, the style, the slang, the way they dressed, everything was different. Even the way they wore their hair. A lot of cats at that time had Jerry curls. You know what I mean? And even though cats in New York had Jerry curl, it wasn't as popular as it had been. And like the Jerry curl phase in the 90s had kind of phased out on the East Coast. That was more of an early 80s thing, but the West Coast was still rocking the Jerry curls. And so the New York cats was just really like, partly threatened by the emergence of a new sound and having to share the hip hop fan base, but also just not really knowing anything about the West Coast and the fact that they were speaking to their constituents, if you will, in their vernacular and their slang. And even though you may not understand it, and it may sound very different because it sounded different to everybody, unless you were from out there. But it was unique. It was fresh. It was dope. You couldn't deny the creative, the creativeness of it. You know, it was good hip hop, and it still is to this day. And you go back and you listen to those records, and you can't front on them. You know what I'm saying? And so, but Tim Dog took exception to the fact that the West Coast was coming up and really started wilding and put the song "Fuck Compton" out, and it actually became a huge underground hit. Now you got to perform that song. You got to come out to the West Coast and do that song out there and see how that goes for you. And one night he ran into some problems. Lucky for him, Tupac had been in the building that night and helped the guy out. Legend has it, and I remember hearing this story back then, that Tupac had Tim Dog waiting like the green room, the back room, and went all the way across the bridge to Oakland, got his own artillery, his own straps, and escorted the man out the club because it was getting real heavy for the guy. And I know it may shock some people because Tupac is supposed to be the West Coast, you know what I'm saying? California love, God to live and die in LA. Why would he help an East Coast cat out? But that wouldn't be the first time and nor the last time that Tupac did things like that. Throughout his life, you can see at different moments, this is who this man was. You know what I mean? Right, wrong, indifferent. This is who he was, and he was for his people. He was for hip hop, and at the end of the day, he wanted to unify everybody. The ultimate goal was unity, despite the hoopla and everything that you saw, there was an intention, there was a purpose to everything that he did, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you liked it or not. He knew what he was doing. And so, no, Tupac was not a gangster or gangster. He was who he was, and he told you who he was, and he let you watch him be who he was. Okay? So, another edition of E.D.I. Mean's Talk My Truth. I just wanted to share that with y'all because I just think it's a dope story and it really speaks to the character of Tupac Shakur, man. I'm gone. Catch up with y'all next time.
Fresh out the pen, O4L business. You know we with the shit. Y'all be with the chit chatter, but the lies got to quit loose.
Yeah, you back with another edition of E.D.I. Mean's Talk My Truth, and this one is a special one. You hear me? A special one for my subscribers that tap in with me exclusively for that exclusive content. Now, I've been getting a lot of questions about an individual that was featured on some of our stuff, and he was specifically featured on a song called Hail Mary, big song. Yeah, he got in where he fit in. Rest in peace to the one and only Prince Ital Joe. Rest in peace to him. My homeboy. A guy that was around us a lot when we was recording music, always positive energy, always bigging us up when we was in the studio recording music, whether he made the song or not. A little backstory on Idol Joe. Was actually Dominican. All these years, I knew him. I just assumed he was Jamaican. He had the locks, talk with the patois and the accent. So I just always thought he was Jamaican. But in all actuality, he was Dominican. He was from the DR. And he was a reggae artist and an actor. Appeared in movies like Marked for Death with Steven Seagal. He got in the game with Marky Mark. Did a couple of projects with Marky Mark. Then somehow ended up around Death Row. First time I heard his voice was on a song called Respect by the Dog Pound. Yeah, doing this thing. I remember Pac immediately liking his voice and liking what he did because he was already a fan of reggae and dancehall. He wanted to incorporate some of that in his music. Now, I don't remember the first song Ital Joe made it on. I do know he did something on the first Hit 'Em Up that we recorded, the one that was more like a freestyle. But I don't know if that's the first record Pac put him on. I do know he ended up on a few other records, like I said, Hail Mary. Another one of my favorites he appeared on, produced by Daz, was a song called Bless My Soul. He did something on that one too. And we had some other songs and records with him that remained unreleased. But Idol Joe was just a guy, he always had the good weed, man. He was the guy with the good weed, man. I used to buy weed from him. You know what I'm saying? I used to buy peas from him every now and then because he also had a gate in Hollywood where he would do his thing. One day I walked into his gate and walking out was two individuals with names y'all might recognize, Jimmy Henchman and Haitian Jack. And they was with Ray J. And it got a little tense, let's just say that. It was a few of us, it was them. It got a little tense. I remember Ray J getting in between us and, you know, Ital Joe basically like, please, not here. Don't do this now at my shop. I already got a lot of heat from the police and whatnot. So we went our separate ways that day. But Ital Joe was also a guy with great advice and always uplifting words. And I'll share with y'all one. For the weed smokers out there, Ital Joe used to say, you gotta smoke the weed slow. He used to say, them youth is smoking the weed too fast. You have to slow down. You have to feel the weed. You have to allow it to soothe your body, ease your mind. You know, real Rastafari use weed for meditation and praying purposes, similar to what the Indians do with the peace pipe. Ital Joe was on that type of time with it. And I'll never forget that when he said that, because we used to just roll up another one, roll up another one. It's like, yeah, slow down. Smoke the weed too fast. So yeah, one time for Ital Joe, man, unfortunately he lost his life 2001 in a tragic car accident coming from Phoenix back to LA. And I remember when he passed, it was definitely felt and a blow around those of us that knew him in the Death Row family. So, peace and love to his friends and family that's still out there. I heard he had a daughter. Yeah, man, rest in peace to Ital Joe. E.D.I. Mean Talk My Truth exclusive.
Sink ships, they gossip like a bitch on the podcast line for the likes and the clicks, telling lies about the click. Get your
Check it out. You're back with another edition of E.D.I. Mean's Talk My Truth. Yes, indeed. I want to get right into it because we got a lot to talk about this week. But start it off. Yeah, this episode of E.D.I. Mean's Talk My Truth is brought to you by CTG, Change the Game Sports. Shout out to my guy Brian over there, the whole staff. Took very good care of me when I did these recent interviews. One with Sean Stockman from Boys to Men, the other with the Laker, the great Laker, Byron Scott, legendary Byron Scott. Did both of their shows. You definitely want to do your due diligence. Go check out both of those interviews. Very good interviews. Two of my favorite of late. Of course, I had the performance with Sean Stockman, acoustic performance, him on the guitar, me rapping, did a version of Keep Your Head Up, mash up with that, Baby Don't Cry, very dope. Then we did an acoustic version of my verse on Hit 'Em Up. A lot of y'all was trying to get at me and say I forgot the words of Keep Your Head Up. Listen, man, these is 30-year-old songs we talking about. I don't always remember my lyrics. Yeah, I smoked a lot of weed. So, you can have fun with it. I'm glad y'all know the lyrics. A couple of y'all was in the comments trying to clown. I love it. Just keep watching. Keep paying attention. Keep the camera moving. I'm kind of fast. But again, shout out Change the Game Sports. Bless me with this bump box. And it's magnetic. Shit is fire. Any metal you can find, you can hang it on there. Got good value. Shout out to Trader Truth, the whole squad over there at Bump Box. Now, let's get into it. The topic of discussion of the week. Drake put up a post and he showed the Death Row emblem. Showed the front of it and the back of it. The front of it, of course, the legendary Death Row logo. And on the back, it had All Eyes on You, 1996. Of course, anything Tupac related creates an uproar. It gets the blogs, it gets the algorithm going. Everybody wants to talk about it. People hit me up asking me, in my DMs asking me, the number one question, is it real or is it a fake? Wow. So with Drake arguably being the biggest rap artist of his time and Tupac being the biggest artist of his time as well, and still one of the most talked about human beings in history, this of course creates a lot of discussion. People want to know. It was automatically assumed that Drake brought the chain, but I digress. For one reason, he never said it. I mean, if you go back and look at the post, he didn't say, I just bought Tupac's chain. He's promoting his latest gig in Copenhagen. Great city, by the way, I've been there. He's gonna have a good time. But everybody just assumed that he bought the chain, that it was Tupac's chain, and that has, to my knowledge, not have been confirmed. People are coming out of the woodwork saying whether it's real or fake. I don't know, but I'll give you a little background on the Tupac chain. The last time most people in our inner circle saw the chain is when Tupac gave it to Hussein Fatal in New York, 1996, when they were out there for the MTV Music Awards. Noble told the story. You can go back and look at that interview. I don't want to get into the details of that, but the chain was last seen in Jersey. After that, I personally don't know where the chain went or what happened. I do know towards the end, Pac was wearing his euthanasia chain more than the Death Row chain. That was something custom made. That was something real special to him. And he was wearing that more than he was wearing any other chain in, his collection. So it remains to be seen whether the chain is a real or it's a fake. If you wanted my personal opinion, I think it's a real fake chain. I think it might be a real Death Row chain, but it might not be Tupac's. It may be a great replica. It's really hard to say. I do know Drake got enough money to, if it is a fake, he ain't gonna lose no sleep. It's probably pennies to him what he paid for it. And I do sometimes scratch my head and wonder, because he did buy the ring. He bought the ring reportedly for $1 million, Tupac's ring. And I do wonder what's his fascination or connection to Tupac. Because he famously said on a record, I didn't cry when Tupac died, but I may cry when Hov does. And, that was always a head scratcher. But whatever. I didn't know he was a Pac fan, or, he's never been super vocal, but of late with the jewelry, Tupac jewelry, rings, and now the Death Row chain, it makes you wonder what it is. And I know, Pac's music sometimes hit people later. Like Fat Joe recently came out and said Pac has really been speaking to him on a personal level, like speaking to that soul, which Pac can do musically. Very rare that rap artists do that. But, first shout out to Joe. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the shout out on the Jada and Joe show. I enjoy their podcast. Make sure you check that out. They're doing a great job over there. But yeah, Joe is saying of late that message has been speaking to him, and that happens, so maybe that happened to Drake. He wasn't really hip to Pac in his youth, but not that he's matured and becoming a man and living an adult life. The music is speaking to him a lot more. And Pac's music was definitely, his music was mature for his age. Most 20-something-year-olds weren't speaking on the subject matter that he was speaking on in the 90s. And, his perspective and point of view on, relationships with women, and, his thoughts on religion and his thoughts on politics is what separated him from the multitude. And so I can see, Pac's music hitting some individuals later in life. Some people get it right away. They understand the Tupac Shakur, they get his music. Some people are just fascinated by the bravado and the rah-rah and everything. A lot of people are into that side of Tupac, and then you have people that are very much into the message and the music and the soul that he put into his music. So it's all good, baby. Either way it goes, I love it. All of us here, we knew what it was. You know what I'm saying? So salute to all of us here, and we welcome everybody else to the congregation, even if it may be late. Real talk. It's E.D.I. Mean, talk my truth. That's enough for the day. I get at y'all later.
Monkey ass hit. All the people want us to facts, you can have that other shit. I got $1 million worth of game, don't let the fame.
Yeah, what it is. It's your guy EDI, and you back with another edition of EDI Means Talk My Truth. Man, and I'm this one is a proud Talk My Truth. I feel proud for hip hop. I feel proud for where the genre has come from and even where it stands today. I know a lot of people out there feel like hip hop is done. You know, they got some statistic I saw the other day that said hip hop hasn't had a top 40 hit. This is the first time since the early 90s that hip hop hasn't had a top 40 hit or something like that. And a lot of people look at hip hop like it might be a dying genre. I don't feel like that. I feel like hip hop is alive and well. And last night proved it. Because one of the greatest groups, in my opinion, in hip-hop history got inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yes, I'm talking about Outkast, Big Boy, Andre 3000, man. Cold-blooded. A cold-blooded group who defined being put in any box better than any group that I can name. There's a lot of great duos that I love, from Run DMC to UGK to EPMD, Mobb Deep, Dog Pound. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of great duos in hip hop that I'm a fan of. And to me, Outkast sits right there at the top. Salute to those brothers for getting that love and that recognition and that acknowledgement for the greatness that they displayed over many years. And even though they didn't put a bunch of albums out, every album had its own vibe, his own energy, always did great numbers, platinum plus if I'm not mistaken. Speaker Box Love Below is probably one of my favorite hip hop albums ever. Yes, ever. That's how good that album is, conceptually, musically, lyrically, production-wise. It's just excellence. And it's excellence for any genre, not just hip-hop. It's excellent if you put it up against rock, pop, reggae, polka. I don't give a fuck what you put it up against. That album stands up strong against any of it. But I'll get to the point. One of the reasons why last night was such a proud moment for me, and it took me back because we spent a lot of time in Atlanta. Tupac bought his first house in Atlanta in I believe early 1993 or 94, and we spent a lot of time there. We have a lot of family and a strong connection to the city. And I first personally moved to Atlanta in late 1992. Shout out to my Uncle OG. Moved me down there, put me up in a condo that he bought, and just let me figure it out. And I can't thank him enough for that. It taught me so much, and I became a man in a lot of ways during that time period. But eventually Tupac came down as well. Of course, he had been to the city several times before, but was looking for a place to start investing his money, get out of LA a little bit. A lot of people wanted him to get out of LA. And so Atlanta became that place. We had family down there already, and Tupac bought his first house on the east side of Atlanta, outside the city on the outskirts in a city called Lithonia. And so that particular house was the original Thug's Mansion. And it was called Thug's Mansion because we all stayed there together. Pac was a young single man, and it was just a house full of niggas, mostly, us. And sometimes when people came in town, they would come and crash at Pac's crib. A lot of so-called famous people, celebrities, definitely walked through those doors and came through and chilled and, had a good time at Tupac's new house that he was very proud for. It had a pool, it had a dope backyard, and We had a good time there, and it was a great time for him to be able to see the fruits of his labor. But while we were down there, Georgia moves at a different pace, man. Atlanta is not New York City, it's not LA. It moves at a much slower pace. The days seem longer, and Tupac would get bored. He was young, he had a lot of creative energy. We would hit the studio here and there, but it was supposed to be a time for him to just relax, and he wasn't very good at that. And so one day he comes up with this idea and he says, yo, I want to throw a party. I want to throw a party, a free event, at a club or something like that. And, just have a good time, and I'm going to perform, and, I just want to invite the city out, And so he had his team at that time, his manager, Watani Tahimba, and his son, Asania. Shout out to them. He had an ATL team, I believe, Shaka Zulu, who went on to later, manage artists like Ludacris and start disturbing the peace. He was also involved, if I'm not mistaken. And so they find this venue, and Pac is like, I just want to perform new shit. I want to try some new shit out for the people. And I think the only song that he might have done that came out was Maybe I Get Around. He might have did Keep Your Head Up. I'm not really sure of the playlist, but it was a dope night. A virtual who's who of Atlanta, celebrity came through. People like Jermaine Dupri and the Brat, the whole Dungeon family, people from LaFace Records, just a who's who. Whoever was in the city came through that night, and the night was amazing. I wish I could describe the vibe for you, but it was a dope vibe. It was a smaller, intimate venue, and Tupac got up there and tore it down, man. And he had us up there with mics backing him up, and it was just a great night for hip hop, for culture, for the people. And like I said, it was a free event, so it was packed, wall to wall. Great night. One thing about the show that I'll never forget though, is when Pac did the song Straight Ballin'. Now, Straight Ballin' wasn't even out yet. This is pre-Me Against the World. This is before even the Thug Life album came out. Straight Ballin', the Easy Mo B version was hot off the presses. Nobody had really heard that. And so I believe that was the last song we did that night. And man, it went up just from the beat alone. And, Pac starts doing it, and and it's difficult to perform hits in front of people. But when you're trying out new music, it could go either way. People sometimes be like, yo, I just want to hear what I know you for. But Straight Ballin' in particular just went up and just had the ATL crowd in the zone. And I remember by the time we got to like the second verse, we started hearing, hootie hoo, hootie hoo. I look back and Outkast is in the back of the stage with all they guys, and they just doing that hootie hoo call throughout the whole song. And for me, that was a dope moment because I was already an Outkast fan. I already thought they were great. Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music was one of my favorite albums at that time. I played it relentlessly. And it was just dope. It was just a dope night for hip hop, man. So again, salute to them brothers for getting that acknowledgement. It is well deserved, man. Like I said, Outkast is one of the greatest groups that hip hop has ever produced. Rest in peace to the great Rico Wade, one of the greatest producers ever. The Dungeon family, the whole team. Pac was a fan of their production. I was a fan of their production. I can't speak for nobody else in the group, but I definitely was a fan of their production, and super thankful that I actually got to work with Rico Wade. Shout out to Shorty B, OG Shorty B. Hold your head, stay strong. We praying for you. But yeah, rest in peace to Rico Wade. And I got a dope Rico Wade story that he told me personally. But I'm going to save that for another Talk My Truth, man. It's your guy, EDI. Appreciate y'all riding with me as I go back. Again, salute the Outkast and the whole Dungeon family. Greatness.
Go to your brain and have your people in pain. E.D.I hard with this dialogue. From the start, came out the dark.
Yes. You're back with another edition of E.D.I Mean's Talk My Truth. Welcome back. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Listen, this one is going back, and I'm gonna discuss a topic that happened back in 2017 with the inauguration of Pac in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, let me go back a little further, because what I always attempt to do, whether I'm doing interviews or whether I'm talking to you guys on Talk My Truth, is speak about subjects that I personally was involved in or personally witnessed, was there, so I can speak from a place of purity and truth. And if I wasn't there, I do my best not to talk about it, man. You know what I'm saying? And I may give my opinion on something, but I do my best to stay away from subject matter, like I said, that I wasn't personally there to witness, such as the incident that happened in New York in 1996 at the MTV Awards, where Tupac and Nas met up. And we've heard many different people speak about it. You've heard Nas speak about it. You heard Young Noble speak about it. He was there. You heard Snoop speak about it. He was there as well. And you have those three stories, but told from three different perspectives. Now, what I want you to keep in mind is that when somebody has an experience, they have that experience from their perspective, period. They don't have that experience from your perspective, my perspective, or anybody else's perspective. All of our perspectives are our vision, our reaction to the events, how we respond to it. And a lot of times, you know, I'm sure in your life, you've had incidents happen and somebody else was there and they see it completely different than you see, even though you guys shared the same experience. So that's what we have to remember when we're talking about perspective. I'm going to talk about my experience with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame from my perspective. Other people that experienced that night will have something completely different to offer you guys than I did, because, again, it's coming from their perspective. Now, to take y'all back to that time, 2017 was a very eventful year. You had two major things happening. You had, of course, Pac being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you also had the movie All Eyes on Me being done and close to being finished and about to be released to the world. It was released to the world in June of that year. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame happened in April of that year. Two major things happening surrounding the life and times of Tupac Amaru Shakur. When I first heard about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and him getting honored and being the first hip-hop solo artist, again, the first hip-hop solo artist to be inducted, it happening in New York City, where we all started, Brooklyn to be exact. Man, to say I was excited about it would be an understatement. I was truly happy for this event, for Tupac to be honored in that way. Some may not see it as a big deal, but Me personally, I saw it as a major milestone. And I had to be there. It was not an option for me to not witness this in person. Me personally. It had nothing to do with anybody else. Me personally. So I had begun, as soon as I heard about it, I had begun to make arrangements to make sure I was there. On my own dime, didn't ask anybody to fly me in, put me up, anything. Completely on my own dime. I didn't have any tickets. Hear me. I didn't have any tickets. I didn't know how I was going to get in. If I had to, I was going to go right to the box office and buy a ticket. And if I was sitting in the last row way up at the top, I didn't really care because I just wanted to be in the building to witness history and to be able to tell my children and grandchildren a story about this amazing night. And so that's exactly what I did. But a strange thing happened. Right when I got to New York, almost an hour after I landed, I got a phone call from Young Noble. And Noble was like, yo, Tretch looking for you. You know, I know you in New York. He want to holler at you about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, mind you, at this point, I didn't know who was performing, who was going to be there. I didn't know nothing about the actual details of the night. All of this information came to me later. So me and Tretch eventually connect, and Tretch is like emphatic that somebody from our crew, and when I say our crew, I mean the Outlaws, got to be there. Now, Young Noble couldn't be there. It was too short notice for him to make his way to New York City. Of course, we know Napoleon lives in Saudi. Castro was definitely gonna be in the building, but from my understanding, was not willing to get on stage and perform, even though he does appear on Hail Mary. And so when me and Tretch spoke, Tretch was emphatic that, you know, he didn't want to do this without people that was actually on the song Hail Mary that he was asked to perform, without people that actually knew and loved Tupac and were loved by Tupac. And I'm quoting him loosely, but this is the energy he was giving me. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to perform with Tretch. I didn't ask Tretch to perform. He asked me, like, yo, you in New York, pull up. You know what I'm saying? I got you covered. You'll have credentials. You know what I mean? I'm gonna send a car to come get you. Pull up and rock Hail Mary with me. So reluctantly, I decided to do it. Once I did get to the Barclays Center later that evening, everything was going according to plan. My credentials were in order. I was led in. I was led to back where Tretch was at. And if you go to my Instagram page, you can see a picture that I took with Tretch, T.I., and Snoop, because we were all backstage getting ready, and they had a sound check, a quick rehearsal took place before we went on stage so everybody would know what they would do. And so they called for Tretch and I to do sound check. We go do our sound check. I had a chance to run into a very gracious Alicia Keys, who was finishing up her sound check. We spoke briefly. She said she knew who I was and listened to Pac music, and I was, you know, completely honored to be honest with you that you know, and Alicia Keys would be familiar with who I was and the music that we created together along with Tupac. So fast forward, we get through the sound check, and now it's just really about chilling until it's showtime. And so I stayed on the premises, stayed backstage, chopping it up with different people. Of course, YG was there as well. YG's in the picture that I took with Tretch and T.I. and Snoop. And, you know, everybody is back there with their significant others and crews and family members. And it was just a really positive time. You know what I'm saying? A lot of love in the building and everybody there on one accord. And that was to honor Tupac and make sure he got his just due correctly on such a monumental night. I can't explain enough how big it is for an artist to be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and especially Pac being the first solo artist. So again, it was all positive, all love, and you know, everybody's ego was checked at the door because it wasn't necessarily about them. It was about Tupac. Then the phone call started to happen. Yeah. Tretch got a phone call from his management or from his agent, and I'll just put it in a nutshell for you. It was stated to him that if I got on stage, his whole performance would be in jeopardy. Now, again, this is right before the show is about to start. This show is filmed live and then edited for everybody to see, but that night it's filmed live. A lot of money being spent. A lot of moving parts going on to make this shit happen, you dig? So, to say the least, Tretch is hotter than a pistol. This nigga is upset and, quite frankly, angry, mad than a motherfucker. He starts threatening to pull out, period. Like, yo, if E.D.I can't get on stage with me, I'm not doing the show. And I always have love for Tretch, man, because if we fast forward all the way back to the early 2000s, and I know some of y'all heard this story about when we was asked to come perform when MTV was honoring B.I.G. and Tupac, and they invited Puffy and Bad Boy and all of these other rappers, but didn't invite the Outlaws. And Tretch, again, being a stand-up guy, got on the phone and said, no, this can't happen without his niggas. And so Tretch has always been solid in that regard. And I always, again, have love and respect for him because he did things when he didn't have to do that. He could have just kept it moving and been about himself and been about his career. And I'm sure some people probably told him to do that. You know what I mean? And Tretch stood on business. You feel me? In a real way. And he stood on business in 2017. And I had to make a decision because I could have let Tretch continue walking that dog, so to speak, and not perform. But again, this night wasn't about me. It wasn't about Tretch. It wasn't about none of the other people. This was about Tupac. So I said, nah, Tretch, don't do that. It's all good. I'm going to fall back. You know what I mean? I don't want this night to be in jeopardy because of my ego and my personal feelings. I don't know who made the phone call. Still to this day, I don't know who made the phone call, who felt like it was a bad idea for me to be on stage. But oddly enough, I didn't take it personal, and a lot of people wanted me to take it personal and felt like I should go to the media and make a big deal out of this. But again, I gotta emphasize that I was too busy being in a state of complete gratitude that not only was Tupac getting this honor, but somebody like Tretch reached out and wanted to make sure history wasn't, written and in a way that erases our contribution to the whole shit. And so at the end of the day, I still was there. I didn't have to buy a ticket and sit way up in the rafters. I watched the show pretty with a pretty good vantage view, and I enjoyed the night, man. And I got a chance to see a longtime friend of mine that I grew up with in Coney Island, Brooklyn. He was actually working at the bar, Clay Center. Didn't anticipate seeing him. That was wonderful. You know what I mean? To be able to see a longtime friend in the building. The whole night, again, was wonderful. Tretch did the best that he could. You know what I mean? If you look at the performance, he clearly was not completely ready to do Hail Mary. He even expressed to me like, yo, I don't know the words. Even in sound check, I had to, back him up pretty much every line because he knew some of the words. But again, this is somebody who's written hundreds of songs and got hundreds of raps in his head. And, everybody's trying to, remember these lyrics and do this right on a very short notice and very compressed time frame. So he did the best he could. Shout out to everybody that performed. Even Snoop's speech. I know a lot of people, especially the Pac fan base, not really a fan of Snoop, and some of the things that he's had to say. But I bring it back to how I started this off. And it's all about perspective. And Snoop has his own perspective on things and his own opinion on certain things when it comes to Tupac, and he has the right to those. Do I agree with everything? No, not all the time, but I do agree with the fact that he has a right as a man and somebody that actually knew Tupac, not somebody that knew of Tupac, to speak his truth. And Snoop has done things behind the scenes, some things that you guys will never know about unless he chooses to speak on it or somebody else chooses to speak on it. But he's done things for Tupac and the estate of Tupac and Tupac's family, and was asked to speak by Tupac's family. So say what you want about Snoop, but Snoop is, somebody that has always, answered the call for Tupac in a lot of different ways. And again, we may not agree with everything he says, but the man does have a right to his opinion and his perspective. And so that is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame story. And again, it was strictly about Tupac that night, man. And it was an amazing night, and it ended in an amazing way. As I was leaving the Barclays Center, I ran into my son. My son was in the building, my oldest son that I have with Tupac's sister, Setua. And we hugged, and, he said to me, he did it. He's in now forever. They can't take that away from him. And I looked at him and I said, you're right. And that was it. I walked out and I left. And then me and Tretch connected later on that night. We had a fucking amazing time. He had a show in the Bronx. I went to the show in the Bronx. Man, I'm in the club in the Bronx and they playing Hit 'Em Up, and I'm getting love while Hit 'Em Up is playing. And then we went to a couple other parties, and I don't think I really slept that night, man. It was an amazing night. And we celebrated for the dawn. All right, y'all, man. That's another edition of E.D.I. Mean's Talk My Truth. I appreciate your time. I'm gone.